welcome again to Creative Connections. I'm Gary Blanchard, and today my guest is Charlie Lask, singer and Neil Diamond tribute artist. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you, Gary. Pleasure to be here.
So when did you start singing professionally?
Back in the 80s. I was in a couple bands. There's a band, August Moon, that we had a pretty decent following, did top 40 stuff, played at all the area bars, and had a good time being a man in my 20s. That was a lot of good stories from back then.
Okay. And so I understand that there was a period of time where life kind of got in the way and you were not performing as much.
Yeah, for quite a few years. Like after that, I ended up getting married, having a family. I'd play the guitar every now and then. Actually, where we are right now was a coffee house at one time that Maggie Sorrell Pulchapek had, and I played over here. I remember many years back playing guitar and singing in here, and there was no pay. It was a very small place, and Maggie said, you could put out a tip pail or whatever. So my kids manned the tip pail, and I let them keep the tips. So they were very cognizant about how the tip was going for the show.
Okay, yeah. The whole tip jar thing is probably a good institution, because there are places that really just can't afford to pay performers.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was doing it just to have a good time and have fun with some friends, and my kids were having a good time.
Okay, yeah. So they kind of grew up watching Dad perform.
Yeah, and other than that, it was just mostly going out and doing karaoke on weekends and having fun with that, and just happened to evolve into something.
Okay, so when did you start doing the Neil Diamond tribute?
It goes back all the way to 2004, and Donna Lee was putting on a benefit for the Ware Senior Center, a variety show at the high school, and she had people auditioning for the show, and I did a few different things, and a couple of them were Neil Diamond songs. By that time I knew that I sounded a little bit like Neil, and I could do them okay, and she heard me do it, and she said, you really have something here. If you'd like to pursue this, I'll help you. I'll get you started. And she lent me a sound system, got me sheet music, CDs to work with, and the guy who was running sound for that show also happened to be kind of sort of an agent. He got me my first couple gigs to start out with, and ran sound for me, and it just took off from that.
Okay, so you sort of fell into the whole Neil Diamond thing.
Yeah, I listened to Neil when I was a kid. I knew a couple songs, but I didn't know most of his stuff, so I stayed in my basement for 4 months learning Neil Diamond.
Okay. And when you think about it, he's had a very long and varied career.
Yeah, he's done a lot of different things. He did country, he was doing some spiritual stuff, and had a very popular Christmas album, and yeah, the man's done a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so I always think that when you kind of do a tribute act, to a degree you have limited your material to work with. But when you have a career as long and as varied as Neil Diamond's, that you don't really run into that.
Well, if I did all Neil Diamond, I could do 6-hour shows. He's got so much material. But, I don't do all Neil in my shows. I throw other things in. I'm not an impersonator. I call myself a tribute artist, and I don't try to do his songs note for note. I do them in my style, and change the arrangements around a little bit in some of the songs, and it seems to work.
Yeah, yeah. And when you think about it, in hearing some live Neil Diamond material, he doesn't always keep the song the same.
Yeah, yeah. You know, his live versions are a lot different than the studio versions, and I'm not a big fan of some of the live versions. I think it really takes away from the studio versions, which are what most people grew up with. And I mean, I far and away like his studio stuff ahead of his live stuff. I mean, there's some exceptions, like Brother Love Live is, a great rendition, but there's some songs, like I was listening to Song Sung Blue, and it was starting to annoy me, the live version. I thought it was pretty lousy, but he's Neil Diamond, so
yeah. Well, he
can do what he wants.
Exactly. Yeah. So, why do you think his music has such a wide appeal?
It's a good question. He's just a great songwriter. I mean, he's maybe the best songwriter that ever lived. He's written hundreds and hundreds of songs. He's written many things that other people have recorded and have been big hits for. And it just strikes a note. He had a hard time breaking into the business. The first people that heard him, the first talent agents, they didn't like his voice. They didn't think he was a good enough singer. They wanted to, have other people record his music, like the Monkees, recorded I'm a Believer and several other of his songs that I'm a Believer was his first #1 hit when the Monkees did it.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember hearing some of his earlier stuff, Kentucky Woman, things along that line.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's sad that you've got artists like him. You've got people like Carole King, who started their music life working at the Brill Building, basically writing songs for other people to sing.
Yeah, Neil Sedaka was there.
Yeah. Paul Simon for a little while too.
Mm-hmm.
So what other music do you include in your shows?
Well, when I have my band, we always do a Gordon Lightfoot medley.
Oh, that's nice.
I really like Gordon Lightfoot. I think he's like the Canadian Neil Diamond. He has a huge catalog of music, and I think he's a legend, just like Neil is. But I like to throw a whole bunch of other things. I've been doing a song lately in my shows that's gone over pretty well by Buffalo Springfield, For What It's Worth.
Okay.
I've been throwing that in there. I do Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash at a lot of shows. And just, random things. Like if I'm doing a 3-hour show, I'll maybe throw a little Harry Chapin in the mix. And,
oh, that's nice.
Just other things that kind of tie in with the same genre.
Okay. So do you ever do the guitar and sing type thing?
No, my guitar has a lot of cobwebs on it. I don't use it very often. And if anyone's watching and interested in buying a couple of guitars, I have it at my store that I'm trying to sell. A 6-string Ovation and a 12-string Yamaha. I have a Takamine that I use, occasionally and bring it in at some live shows with the band. But for the most part, when I'm doing a live show with the band, I'm just, walking around with my mic doing my thing. I leave the guitar playing to the professionals.
Right. I should do the same. I remember seeing you at the West Brookfield Common, mm-hmm. in one of the concerts at the Common. And it was really great because, with the wireless mic, you were out in the audience singing, which, made it a little hard to follow you sometimes. But it was so great to, have that where you were kind of interacting with the people down on the field. And I think it really added a lot to the performance.
Oh, thank you, Gary. I appreciate that. I mean, that's what I do, whether it's an outdoor show at the band or, an intimate setting. I'm not a stage performer. I'm not, standing on a stage singing at people, because that would mean they'd have to watch my dancing, and that would make people cringe. So, I walk around in the audience and talk to people, and I try to get people involved in my shows and, make people feel like they're a part of it. And that's what I enjoy doing.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed is that you have some special stage clothing that you
mm-hmm.
wear.
Yes. Yeah, I have a lady who makes my shirts for me, Patty Wolfenden from Palmer. She's been a good friend from the time I started my shows, and you know, she's a talented tailor, and I have probably at least 8 or 9 shirts in 8 or 9 different colors. She's working on a silver one for me right now.
Okay. And those are great because not only do they pick up the lights, but when you do go out in the audience, it makes it easier for people to follow you.
Yeah, when I first started out, the first like year or so, I kind of was like dressed like Johnny Cash. Like I'd have a black shirt and a black vest. And I found like when I went into the audience, nobody had a clue where I was. You know, I got like lost in a black hole out there. So then I redressed myself after the first year or two in the business with some brighter clothing.
Okay. So have you ever felt kind of limited in people's minds with the Neil Diamond thing?
What do you mean by that?
When people think of you, they think strictly of you're doing Neil Diamond, or?
Yeah, I think that's, you know, people come in my store, I'm walking down the street, hey, that's Neil Diamond. It's like, okay, I mean, that's a compliment, you know,
Yeah.
to be, you know, assimilated with Neil Diamond. I mean, that's a big honor, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many worse people could mistake you for. Or,
That's right. I mean, they could say, hey, you look like Charlie Manson or something, you know. You know, so
Yeah.
I'll take Neil Diamond.
Yeah, I'm more likely to get that in this day and age. But now, sometimes you do work with backing tracks.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times you work with a band. Which do you like better?
Well, I mean, the majority of my shows are with backing tracks, and I mean, it comes down to economics. You know, a lot of venues, you know, their budgets are limited, and you know, if I'm doing it, I like to get paid, and but to me, it's a lot more fun when I'm doing it with a band. There's a lot more energy, and you know, I have some great musicians that I get to work with, you know, when I'm doing a live show like that. But you know, unfortunately, economics don't allow using a live band in the majority of my shows.
Right. So how did you put the group together? How did you find people to work with?
Well, after I was in the business for a short time, I was lucky to come across and become good friends with Joe Pereira, who at the time was Donna Lee's keyboard player. And we became good friends, and Joe put together the Tribute to Great Legends show that started at the Hukilau in 2006.
Okay.
And from there, you know, I started doing some live shows, and Joe is the backbone of my bands, along with Frank Serafino, who's one of the top guitar players in Western Mass. Plays at, you know, he's playing out 4 or 5 nights a week in different restaurants and stuff. He's a great singer, you know, great guy. And then for bass, originally Scotty Cole was playing bass for me. He was now with Moose and the High Tops, and he plays with Seven Bridges Road. The last few years, Neil Schermerhorn has been playing bass for me.
Okay.
And for drums, we rotate guys in. The last few shows, CJ from Moose and the High Tops has been filling in, and CJ Messier, you know, one of the best drummers in Western Mass. I mean, he's very, very good. So I have some great musicians backing me when I'm doing this.
Yeah, it sounds like a good lineup, and I've heard, you know, I've heard the band with you before, and you know, they really do. It amazes me because, you know, a lot of times the recordings have full orchestrations, and but the band manages to bring a lot of that in. So you really do have that feeling that you know, you're listening to a live version of the album.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate to have some very talented musicians to work with.
Yeah. So, is there a particular favorite song that you like to perform?
There are a few. I like I Am I Said. That song.
That is, I think, just an amazing song.
Yeah, I enjoy doing that song. Holly Holy is another one I enjoy. Play Me. everybody's favorite who isn't a huge Neil Diamond fan is naturally Sweet Caroline. That gets the most play. Everybody knows Sweet Caroline.
Well, everybody in who listen, what is it, Boston Red Sox?
Yeah, they play that song.
I'm not a sports guy, so but I knew one of the local sports team uses that song. So, yeah, I really got into Neil Diamond back in the late 60s, early 70s when he was doing like Brother Love, Holly Holy, Suleiman. Those were just such amazing songs.
Yeah, I mean, that was really his heyday,
Yeah.
the late 60s or through the mid 70s. Like, he started in 66. That's when he first recorded Solitary Man and Cherry Cherry, and
Right.
just from there, it just took off for him.
Yeah. But it's funny because I remember hearing those, and then I remember the Monkees doing "I'm a Believer," but it never occurred to me that that's when his career really kicked off, because I kind of remembered him from the earlier days. So, yeah. What is the strangest thing you've ever have happened at a performance?
I could pretty much write a book.
I imagine you could.
I mean, I've had almost every catastrophe happen during a show. I mean, there's one incident that is kind of funny and, kind of an amusing story now at this point, but like, it was shortly after I first started, and Bruce Marshall at Real Oldies, he had a Katrina benefit at the Best Western in West Springfield, and it drew like over 1,000 people. It was a huge show with like maybe 10, 15 different performers performing in the show. And I remember walking through the crowd during that show, and a woman got me in a headlock, and I couldn't get away from her. Like, she had me in like it was a combination bear hug and headlock. And fortunately, my best friend at the time was there with his girlfriend, and she came over and like intermediated and like got this woman off of me. It was, I thought I might like not be able to like return to the stage. I might be incapacitated. but there've been a lot of funny stories over the years, a lot of good memories.
I can imagine. I remember my wife and I went to see a show at the Hukilau. And it was you and, among others, the performer I remember, and I can't think of his name, but he was doing the Rod Stewart.
Yeah, Rick Larimore.
But that's it, Rick Larimore. And I remember he came over and he was standing on the table that my wife and I were at, and singing to her, and so those type of shows I think are a lot of fun for people. How did all these tribute artists kind of start getting together?
Well, Joe put it together in 2006, and it really became a huge show. Right off the bat, like, we were selling out. We were doing like 2 shows at the Hukilau, like selling out 2 shows. And after several years, he decided to move it to Chez Joseph, and averaging 700-800 people a show.
Wow.
For these shows. And one of the things, and well, there's so many things to talk about with it, but one of the things that like is really like so special to me about it are the friendships that I've made with this over the years. Like the people that I do the tribute shows with, like Rick and Ray Gilmette and Patrick Tobin and stuff. They've become friends over the years. Back in April, we came back from our second Legends cruise. Joe had put together Legends cruises based off of the Legend shows, and
okay.
We did our second one. We came back in April, and I really had a lot of good times, and we've really bonded, I think. And this, another one of the many friends that I've made from the shows over the years is Jimmy Maz, whose career has taken off. He was on the main stage at the Big E this year with his Glenn Campbell tribute. And that show's going national, and he's one of like the busiest guys, doing what we do. Like, the man hardly ever has a day off, And he invited me down to his place in Florida in January, and I'm staying with him, and Rick's coming down. We're doing a legend show down in Florida in January.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, the cruises sound like they're a lot of fun.
We had a blast, and it really grew from the first one. I think Joe had maybe around 80, 90, 100 people. This last one we had over 150, and everybody had a great time.
Okay, so is this, how long is the cruise?
The first one was 5 days, the last one was 7.
Okay.
And when we were doing our show the second night, which happened to be the night that we were going through a hurricane, so like people are like, losing their meals all over the place, and we're trying to perform a show while the boat's like going like this, and
Oh, gee.
and I mean, I was having a hard time, and I was amazed. Ray Gilmet has a prosthetic leg, and how this man was able to keep his balance with one leg where I couldn't keep mine with two. I couldn't even imagine, but that was very interesting trying to get through that show. And the ship's personnel liked our show so much that they had us do our show the last night of the cruise for the entire ship.
Wow, that's nice. Yeah, so you have some shows coming up?
I do. I have a busy schedule coming up. Starting Saturday, I have 4 shows in 8 days.
Wow.
So Sunday, December 2nd, I'll be at Storedon at the Big E in West Springfield with Jimmy Maz and Seven Bridges Road, which are great Eagles tribute band, and Joe Pereira. And then Saturday, December 8th, I have my annual holiday show at Teresa's with Cher. And this year, our guest that we're bringing in with us is Lady Gaga.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then the next night, we're doing the same show at a place that used to be called Club One, and now it's called The Hills, out in Feeding Hills. And we're doing that same show on December 9th.
Okay. So keeping pretty busy.
Yeah.
And, all of this, working and family and trying to have a life.
Yeah, it's my fun job. I have a blast doing it. I mean, like I said, I made a lot of good friends in the entertainment business. Like Floyd Patterson's become a good friend of mine who
that's nice.
has a very popular band, great dance band. He's been around since the 80s. He was emceeing shows. He emceed a show for us with August Moon back at the VIP in Springfield back in the mid-80s. And, the guy's still around. And, he had some nice things to say about me, about, how he says, like, I'm just like your average Joe during the day, and then like Clark Kent when I put my leather pants on.
It really is, I think that's a very good point, because knowing you, like this, and then seeing you on stage, you don't quite guess that that star power is lurking inside.
Well, the lady who works for me, Judy, who is one of my closest friends and a wonderful, wonderful lady. Her daughter Candace lives down in Virginia, and she comes up to visit from time to time, and she just wants to know whether it's going to be the fun Charlie or not. And so when I'm performing, I'm the fun Charlie.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't be fun all the time.
Yeah, there's only so much fun you can have selling pants.
Yeah, I could imagine so. Okay, so is there a question that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have asked?
Nothing that I can really think of. I mean, I think we've covered all the bases. I'm just, how fortunate I feel that I am to have been able to do what I'm doing. I mean, at this stage in my life, I really didn't expect to be, doing anything like this, and I'm going to do it until they have to wheel me out on the stage. You know, I'm not giving this up for anything. I enjoy doing it so much. And I've just met so many wonderful people over the years, and made such great friends over the years by doing this, that I really feel totally blessed to have had this in my life.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing, being of the generation that was saying don't trust anyone over 30, and our rock idols were singing I Hope I Die Before I Get Old. We have the Rolling Stones in their 70s and 80s going out on a new tour.
Yeah.
And, we've discovered that getting old doesn't have to end the fun.
Chubby Checker's doing a concert at the Wolf's Den. I mean, I would imagine they're probably putting a metal rod behind them to keep them upright. But, I mean, some of these guys, yeah, I mean, 70s, 80s, still touring, and it's amazing. Some of the bands I listened to back going to high school in the 70s, REO Speedwagons and the Def Leopards from the early 80s. I mean, these bands are touring and selling out stadiums still.
Yeah, yeah. So 20 years from now, we can go see Charlie Lask as Neil Diamond.
Or a hologram of me doing it.
Okay. All right. So, Charlie, thanks again for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure, Gary. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad we had this chance to sit down, because I've always enjoyed your music and never really had the chance to talk to you about it. So.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So that's another episode of Creative Connections. Thank you for joining in, and we will see you again next time.